Polonnaruwa. This is one of the most popular tourist destinations in central Sri Lanka. Hundreds of thousands of foreign and local tourists come here every year to see this beautifully preserved ancient city and its really magnificent structures and buildings and sculptures. But Pulunaruwa isn't just a tourist destination, Sophia. It isn't just a leisure destination. Like sites like Anuradhapura and Sirigaya, Pulunaruwa plays a critical role in the construction of the idea of Sri Lanka, not only as an exclusively Buddhist nation, but as an exclusively ethnic Sinhalese nation. That is, Pulunaruwa has been constructed as a way for the Sinhalese Buddhists to understand themselves. Hey Sophia, so we're on our way to the ancient city of Pulunaruwa to understand the role tourism and tourist sites play in narratives of nationhood, nationality, ethnic identity, and historical framing of a war. Pulunaruwa, this famous tourist site, is actually a front in the ongoing war of narratives that insists that only the Sinhalese and the Buddhists have a claim to this land. Pulunaruwa is where the state conducts war by other means. So let's go. We're going to just take a ride around this beautiful lake, which is just on the edge of the city of Polonnaruwa, and find our way to the ancient city itself.
No.
This man, Sophia. Okay, well, not this man specifically, but the tour guide. We're going to begin our discussions around Polonnaruwa with him. We rarely think of them. We rarely consider them other than just people here to help and explain to us the history of a location. However, tour guides serve as gatekeepers and creators of historical narratives. They are the frontline troops in a nation's war of narratives. Millions will learn more about history and politics and about a nation's people from their mouths than from any library or state-sanctioned archive or any published history book. Tour guides, Sophia, are the soldiers in this war of narratives, and sites such as Polonnaruwa are the battlegrounds where this war plays itself out practically every day. In fact, in his book, Charred Lullabies, which we'll talk about shortly, E. Valentine Daniels called the tour guides the new historians of the folk. Charred Lullabies is an anthropology, and Daniels traveled originally to Sri Lanka and somewhere in the mid-1980s to study women's folk poetry. And then he got caught up in the question of, the political violence in the country and wrote an anthropology of it. It is in this book that Daniels travels to tourist sites like Anuradhapura, Sirigaya, and Polonnaruwa. And what he finds is that the histories of these historical sites have been very carefully woven into a more modern Sinhalese nationalist narrative. Daniels points to the importance of the Sinhalese-speaking tour guide because of the fact that there are hundreds of thousands of Sinhalese who visit these sites. And he points out how again and again and again, these tour guides, they will take the tourists to the palaces, the temples, the dagobas, and talk about the glorious past of the Sinhalese. And again, when they explain the reasons for the ruins and destructions of these sites, they would point the finger to the Tamils, who are always referred to as invaders from India. And what Daniels points out is that what this does for the Sri Lankan tourists is that it acts as a confirmation, and these sites act as material evidence of something that they have always suspected, that the Tamils are the enemies of the people, and they have always been the enemies of the glorious Sinhalese past, which they went and were determined to destroy. Now, if you think that this is something that has come to an end, well, just take a look at these 2 YouTube videos I found online, and there are hundreds of other examples that demonstrate and show to you how this is still continuing.
The site what we're at?
First I will explain about the history of the Polonnaruwa.
Okay, and our guide today is?
Mallava.
Mallava. Okay, thank you very much.
On to a guide lecture.
Fantastic.
And let's go there.
Okay.
First I will explain to you about history of the Polonnaruwa.
Okay.
Sri Lanka had been 8 kingdoms. First kingdom was Anuradhapura. Second one, Polonnaruwa. Third one, Dambadeniya. Last one, Kandy. Lastly, Indian people came to Sri Lanka. Right. They are invaders, they are enemies. They destroy everything, every palaces, every temples, like a cemetery gardens, and finish this kingdom and begin in third one, Dambadeniya, 12th century, destroy within 13th century. By Kalinga Maga. Name of the invader, Maga, he came from Kalinga province of India. But Indian people burned to this palace. After burn, today we can see some burn marks because they are, that one also.
Burned by Tuttu. It was destroyed. The Sri Lankans used to fight a lot. There was a lot of kings overthrowing other kings, a bit like European countries in the 10th to 12th centuries. Everybody loved a good fight. Right, let's go.
We are going to see this palace, 7th floor, 1,000 rooms. But today only the 2nd floor because they're destroyed by Tamil invaded in South Indian. Okay.
Tourist sites are not natural. Sophia, they are carefully curated political and ideological projects. Wherever a nation pointed to look is an act of ideology and political power. This is true in Paris or in Polonnaruwa. Tourism, especially tourism to historical sites, is never an innocent act. Now, tourists more often than not simply accept the stories that they receive at these sites as authoritative and true. Well, they become unwitting participants in the spreading of highly nationalized, ethnicized, and I would argue even racist narratives and concepts.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
This is going to sound ridiculous, but monkeys stole my passport. Pulunaruwa 2025. Deep in the jungle around this tourist ancient jungle city, I stop to make some photographs. Placing my bag next to my motorcycle, I wander into the dark, dangerous, ominous jungle, innocent of the dangers that lurk nearby. As I walk into the deep jungle and get to work, suddenly I hear a sound and I turn around. I see a terrifying beast with massive fangs and huge claws, Sophia, reaching for my bag. This thing, Sophia, is at least 7 feet tall and 300 pounds. A monster like you've never seen. It snarls and roars at me, menacingly. I rush bravely towards it to fight it with my bare hands, but he runs up a tree with his companion, my bag in hand. All my valuable documents are in the bag, Sophia. My passport, my IDs, my driver's license, my credit cards. My bag in his hands, he snarls and roars at me from above, baring his fangs. I'm at a loss. What do I do? There's no one around to help. I cannot leave this place because then he may just disappear and I'll never find him again. I scream, I hurl abuse at him. He looks down at me, his huge, blood-filled eyes staring down. I can do nothing but hope that this beast, this monster, this creature from hell will come down, will come to his senses, come down from the tree and give my stuff back. I just sit and wait. There's just nobody around. There's no place where I can go. But I want to show to this animal that I will not surrender, that I will win. Just as I am about to give up hope, 15, 20 anxiety-filled minutes go by and suddenly I hear something fall. It's my passport. I rush to grab it. Soon I see that my license, my credit cards, my IDs come tumbling down from above. I grab all of them and I look up. He's clearly going through my stuff. He's clearly trying to see something and find what he's looking for. I'm not sure. And then I finally hear him throw the entire bag down. Saved. Now, some people are going to tell you that the Polonnaruwa monkeys kind of look like this. Trust your father. this is what that beast looked like. Okay, so yeah, just go with that. Pulunaruwa is a 19th century phenomenon, discovered, so to speak, first by British troops and then by colonial officers and eventually by amateur Orientalists and archaeologists. It is, as Bernard Cohen once said, a victim of colonial interpretations and epistemic relations. The colonialists ignored living histories and cultures and instead spent time, quote unquote, unearthing and quote unquote, rescuing fortresses and palaces and bathing pools and gardens and stupas, all of which had by that time become largely irrelevant to the people who were actually living there. There's nothing natural about Pulunaruwa, and there's nothing transparently historical or important about it. And Sophia, narratives are actually all over the streets of Polonnaruwa, political narratives. One just has to pay attention. For example, this mural, this beautiful mural to Luther Gemmen, who painted on a wall, is, one could argue, part of the normalization of a Sinhalese Buddhist mythico-historical storytelling, something that imbues itself into the common consciousness. And it is no coincidence that right across from this mural is a statue of a Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, S.W.R.D. Bandaranaike, from 1956. Many would argue that Bandaranaike is the man who lit the match that set the fire that we now would call the Sri Lankan Civil War. He is responsible for the Sinhala Only Act, or what is known as the Sinhala Only Act, that was passed and that defined and in fact dismissed Tamil and Tamil language as a language that belongs to Sri Lanka. He is and remains a venerated and respected political leader and political figure in this very city of London. The book that I believe discusses this question of how history is actually written and the role that power and ideology plays in its production is Michel Roth-Trio's magnificent text called Silencing the Past. I think this is one of the most accessible books on this question. And although Trio's case studies are almost all from the United States, he talks about the really popular tourist site of the Alamo in Texas. He talks about the way in which the narratives around Christopher Columbus are framed. He even talks about the ill-conceived idea that Disney once had of building a slavery theme park. Yeah, a slavery theme park. You will not remember this, but this text was fundamental to the work I was doing in Rwanda, looking at the ways in which the Kagame dictatorship was using the memory and aftermath of the genocide to entrench a one-man rule, suppress freedom of speech, close the press, and block any kind of political opposition. The tour guide, Sophia, turns up in Trio's text as well. I'm going to quote from it. There's a throwaway paragraph, practically a throwaway paragraph, but it has always stayed with me. Less visible institutions that also sort sources to organize facts according to themes or periods into documents to be used and monuments to be explored. Now, in that sense, a tourist guide, a museum tour, an archaeological expedition, or an auction at Sotheby's can perform as much of an archival role as the Library of Congress. History is always an active act of production. And it's not something passive. It's not something innocent of political priorities and ideologies. It's assembled by men and women who make very specific decisions and choices and judgments about its assembly. When we are given a history, whether it's in a history text, whether it's at a tourist site, we must always remain conscious of the fact that what we're hearing is just one story that has been given the power to act as truth. Pulunaruwa is a 10th century city. It was once the center of an important empire. There's no doubt about that. But very much like the Mahavamsa that we talked about in the previous episode, Pulunaruwa's centrality to the narrative of Sri Lankan sense and idea of self is a colonial construct. So in future episodes, we'll talk about some more contemporary books that tell us a little bit more about the modern reasons for the roots of this war. But I started in Polonnaruwa because I want to underline the fact that colonial categories continue to inform and infest our understanding of the world and our understanding of ourselves, and they remain very much at the root of so many of our conflicts.